Here am I. And let me hold on a sec. Um, oh, what I would I'm going to hark back to our original presenter, who I thought did a magnificent job, most importantly, of presenting himself in 2 or 3 minutes. And because he has a distinguished, as many of our presenters have a distinguished resume. So who am I? Because I don't think most of you know me, which gives me a chance to tell you what my mother would want me to tell you. So I I went to Boston University in their 6-year medical program, which means in 6 years you get an MD and an AB. And then I folded a PhD in biochemistry into that. So in 8 years, my parents finally got to go to a graduation. So I received 3 degrees on one day. I was in the Boston Globe, which was the local newspaper, for getting 3 degrees in one day. It was just a curiosity, but it allowed me to start with one group of medical students, then teach them biochemistry as a graduate student, and then graduate with a completely different group of people who were also very nice and trying to do okay. I really wanted to go to the Harvard system. And a guy named Dan Dakin was my padrone, was my meal ticket. We actually published an article about how collagen is activated by platelets, or how platelets are activated by collagen, in the Journal of Clinical Investigation before I graduated from medical school. And that was supposed to get me on the Harvard ladder. And a few days in January, this is when the internships are actually finalized. Dan calls me up and he says, I don't think you're going to get your internship. I said, what did I do? I thought I was such a good boy. And he said, it's not what you did, it's what I did. I said, what did you do? He said, well, Howard Hyatt. Now, you may not know who Howard Hyatt is, but he was the dean of the School of Public Health at Harvard for many years after being the chief of medicine at Beth Israel and so forth. So Dan Dakin, had a disagreement with Howard Hyatt. And the consolation prize was that he became the chief of medicine at the West Roxbury VA hospital. That was a promotion for him. That was a disaster for me. So I ended up doing internal medicine under Norman Levinsky at University Hospital. And then a miracle happened. I got to the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center in clinical pathology. So I got to do a residency. I got to set up my own laboratory. I got to do what I wanted, not what someone else told me. And my bosses were wonderful. They said, well, you're here, do something. They were very engaged in whatever they were engaged in, and they didn't need me to distract them, but they said, do something. So we did occult blood testing. This is going to seem odd, but it turns out to be relevant. We did occult blood testing to prove that in that day and time, vitamin C inhibited the test, made it falsely negative. And if you ate green beans or meat, the test was falsely positive. So we developed a better screening procedure for occult blood testing that only cost a few $1,000s rather than $250,000 per case to detect. And that ended up in the New York Times. On the front page, right-hand column under Larry Altman. Now, Larry Altman was an MD, and he wrote for the New York Times for many years. Why did this happen? Not because of me. The deputy director of the National Cancer Institute thought that this was something worth the world knowing about. Why am I telling you? Because the day this happened, I got the New York Times. I go into my boss's office. I have the paper under my arm. He says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, did you see the paper?" He said, "Yes, we saw the paper. How long have you been here?" And I said, "Well, about 20 minutes. He said, "Do you know how many people have been here for 20 years who have not been in the New York Times? And today you are persona non grata. Go home, have a drink, do whatever you want, but you can come back tomorrow." That was very good advice. So I had incredible opportunities, including to work out how platelets get activated by collagen, and therefore the relationship between platelet activation and cardiovascular disease as in relation to diabetes. Now, this was in collaboration with Don Fry and Bob Maley. Bob Maley coined the term lipoprotein, so he's a kind of important guy. And Don Fry is the fellow who noticed as a physical chemist that at bifurcation points when blood pressure goes up, there's damage to the endothelium or blood vessel lining of the blood vessels. My role was to show that platelet changes in adrenaline response or ADP response or arachidonic acid response, or more importantly, collagen response. Platelet response to those four agonists, those four stimuli, determine years to decades ahead who's going to have a cardiovascular catastrophe. And much gets back to how much simple sugar versus fiber complex carbs, how much omega-3 to omega-6, how much zinc to copper, how much magnesium to calcium, how much sodium to potassium, and so forth and so on. Ratios. Ratios. Very often in biology, we try to look for a single answer to a single issue. And I'm here to say in biology, in physical chemistry, that might be true. In biology, that's not true. So my contribution to this activity has to do with wound healing. Now, wound healing has to do with a lot of different phenomena, including, do you have enough of the essential? And by essential, I mean your body can't make them, so you got to take them in. Do you have enough of the essential nutrients? Do you have too much of the antitoxic, harmful, oxidative anti-nutrients? Stop that. And do you have things in balance? Because it's really about ratios, it's really about balance, it's really about homeostasis, it's really about physiology, not just chemistry. So, for example, we all want ATP. ATP is the energy molecule of the body. ATP requires a molecule of magnesium to be with it in order to activate it 100% of the time. If you want to get magnesium into the body, you measure the urine pH in the morning. You use that to assess how much magnesium you need with choline citrate. Because if you take ionized magnesium with a teaspoon of choline citrate, you triple the uptake of magnesium. And you can correct metabolic acidosis. You can correct the deficit in magnesium that causes the proton gradient to go down. You can correct the deficit in magnesium that makes ATP not work. You can correct the deficit in magnesium-dependent enzymes that are dependent on magnesium, and you can correct the problem of transport of fats that are magnesium dependent as an antioxidant in 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 transit, in lipoprotein transit of essential fats. It turns out that magnesium is an antioxidant if it's present. And if it's absent, there's an absence of that specific antioxidant. So this gets into lots of details of biochemistry, and I really don't have more than a few more minutes, I think, to conclude. But I want you to know that if you look from a point of what's called nature's alkaline way or nature's pharmacy, Dr. J, DRJ, is my brand to convey to you the opportunity for biology and physiology before pharmacology. We're not against pharmaceuticals. We're against the inappropriate use of pharmaceuticals. We're against things that impair stomach digestion when stomach digestion is important, and then it's very important for pancreatic function and liver hepatic function and hepatic spleen kidney function, which are all very vulnerable to the biological toxins, the anti-nutrient oxidative persisting pollutant hormone disruptors, the solvent residues, the toxic metals, the mold products, the radioisotopes. These are all, those are the 5 categories of anti-nutrients. And I want you to have enough of the essentials to not only deal with the burden that you have, the oxidative burden, but do you have enough of the essentials, which means a C cleanse regularly and polyphenolics to go with that. This means magnesium and choline citrate based on the urine pH in the morning. This means enough B complex to keep the urine sunshine yellow. This means more omega-3 and less omega-6. And I could go on, but I think this would be a good place to stop. Any questions, comments? What I've tried to say is that wound healing is an indication of how the body is responding, including to repair. And that repair means enough of the good and not too much of the bad. So I want you to follow nature's pharmacy. I want you to follow nature's alkaline way. I want you to see the opportunity to repair and rehabilitate and reuse and recycle biologically, physiologically, homeostatically first.
So thank you very much, Russell. That was very amazing, your speech. I have a short question to the end. So you would suppose if there is a bad or prolonged wound healing, it could be a sign that there is something wrong in the organism?
Oh, no, exactly right. Either scurvy, which means too little ascorbate as the maternal antioxidant, or metabolic acidosis, which means magnesium deficiency at the cellular level, or both, because they go together.